So first, let's talk about the fact that these are workers who were already, before this pandemic, considered low-wage, unskilled workers who were struggling to make ends meet, struggling for higher wages. And with this pandemic, suddenly have had to bear the burden of essentially feeding people as this virus spreads, right?
I think the first thing, and thank you very much for bringing up this important issue, uh, the Food Chain Workers Alliance and all of its affiliates across the continent, we have a lot of concerns about the idea of essential labor.
Hmm.
There's a narrative in the media and there's a narrative with government when we think about what essential labor is. We think about the firefighters, first responders, ambulance, and doctors. We very little think about the precarious workers who before this crisis were facing exploitative conditions. So there is absence of employment standards or labor protections, occupational health and safety, workers' compensation. Many of the workers in the food industry are undocumented or as guest workers, and they have the inability to exert their rights because of their immigration status. And that seems to have fallen off the table in our current conversation about essential labor.
And here in the United States, I should mention you're in Toronto, Canada, although Food Chain Workers Alliance spans both the US and Canada. But here in the United States, with the recent stimulus that was passed, we are told that Americans would get up to $1,200 per person, $500 per child. But now we're learning the details that there are tax-paying immigrants who are likely to not receive this payout, especially if they live in mixed immigration status households.
And that should be concerning for all of us. This idea that undocumented people with precarious immigration status, immigrants, racialized communities are not going to have the same access to benefits, whether it's in the United States or in Canada. There seems to be this differential mode, a differential understanding of what the government's going to provide for some workers at the expense of others. So I think it's really important and critical that people in the United States, people in Canada are pushing to ensure that there's a universality where people can access benefits, whether they have immigration status or not.
Let's talk about which workers are considered, part of this kind of confluence of things that need to happen in order for people to be fed. The Food Chain Workers Alliance. What does a food chain exactly represent?
So the Food Chain Workers Alliance is an alliance of 32 groups across the continent. Everything and anything from from farm workers to restaurant workers to truckers to warehouse workers to grocery workers. All of these are the usually hidden voices that make up the food chain that gets to our table. So just in the last couple of weeks,